You're watching Newsfeed AM. Let's get into this discussion now. The first state capture case has fallen apart in court. The accused in the 25 million rand Nulane Investments trial have been discharged. This is due to insufficient evidence against them. Now, the court ruled that the state failed to produce enough evidence to show that the Gupta family and their associates were implicated in the alleged laundering of the proceeds of alleged Nulane fraud. Let's speak now to the Director of Open Secrets, Hennie van Vuuren, who talks to us from Cape Town this morning. Hennie, good morning to you, and thanks for your time. Let's start with the discharge versus an acquittal. This is something that I think is being stressed by the NPA, that a discharge is not exactly an acquittal. So does this give the NPA a fighting chance to reinstate this case, so to speak?
Well, Oli, good morning. I think the first question before we get to what happens next is why did we end up in the mess that we're in? And quite clearly that was because of the conduct of the prosecutors and ultimately the leadership of the NPA that simply should have done better. I think civil society groups over the weekend have been stressing that. I think it's important for us to learn from our lessons. There is the possibility that they may be able to bring some of these charges again, but what the judge is saying is that these are not serious people. That means the leadership of the NPA are not serious about their work. They have not only, it's not a case that sort of fell apart because they made one or two mistakes in admitting evidence. The judge is saying there's 25 million rand that's missing. I can see that. But when Iqbal Sharma and the Gupta lieutenant and his various associates were involved allegedly in money laundering, the involvement of Deloitte obviously in this as well, you as the state are not presenting any compelling evidence to us that we can arrive at the conclusion that all these people that you've implicated can in fact be found guilty potentially for their crimes. And I think that's going to set a very high bar for any attempt to proceed against this matter again. And of course, this was a building block not only for the Estina case, and as you said in your introduction, Polly, it's one of the first state capture cases we've actually seen come to trial, which is really important. In many instances, we haven't even seen the charge sheets, rather in some instances. And of course, it was going to be the basis on which the Guptas should have been extradited from the UAE. We went to the UAE and said we are prosecuting in the Nulane matter as the state, and the state therefore requires this extradition of those individuals. So I think it's important for us just to recognize what a fundamental, absolute failure there has been. And one doesn't say that lightly. It's not something that one wishes on the National Prosecuting Authority, but it's not, I would argue, and we at Open Secrets would argue, as Advocate Andrea Johnson and her colleagues have been saying, sort of a practice run or a dry run. This is real life, and you should never have made the mistakes you did.
Hennie, you make a very good point. In fact, when you make that point that this is not a test run, and that's not how the NPA should have actually approached this case, you bring me to a question that the NPA will always say, and that is that you go to court or you take a matter to court because you believe that you have a winnable case against the accused. So if the NPA genuinely believed that they had a solid case, why is it that the judge would have such catastrophic words for the NPA? And that is that I think her words were that this was her words escape me now, but she was just absolutely scathing on the NPA. So perhaps the question is, why take a case to court if it was not winnable in the first place?
Yeah, I think we should separate these things out, Polly, and I think that the judge in this matter has certainly been scathing in the way in which she described it. In fact, this is a true embarrassment to the state, but we should separate that out of from the evidence that there is in fact a crime. The judge is saying, look, I appreciate the fact that there is money that's missing. You just aren't helping the court to arrive at a point to explain how the money went missing, i.e. it wasn't spent on what it was intended to be spent. And the warning signs have been there. I think what happened at the end of last week and what we've been digesting over the weekend shouldn't come as a surprise. We saw that key pieces of evidence were simply not even admitted into record because the state, meaning the National Prosecuting Authority, wasn't able to make the arguments, for example, Polly, why the Gupta leaks, that important massive trove of information that really helped assist the Zondo Commission as well, the evidence of communication between the state capture network around the Guptas, but many other individuals in our political life, corporate world, and the various middlemen that were involved. That wasn't even admitted into evidence. And that really does suggest that the state came ill-prepared. Now, it may be the fault of individual prosecutors. That's the responsibility of the NPA to sort it out. But such an important case. This is one of the seminal cases, in fact, a test of the NPA's ability to prosecute any state capture crimes. The fact that they bungled it to such an extent that it's an absolute mess, which I think is exactly what the judge was implying in this matter. She was scathing of the NPA's conduct, simply means that they came unprepared. They didn't do their homework. Now, it's an important reminder that these are public officials. They represent us through the state as the people. They need to act against the powerful. And where they aren't doing those jobs, we need to question whether those people are fit for the purpose of running those institutions, or they need to prove the argument differently and do their jobs. And right now, that's not what we're seeing. So I think there needs to be an honest response from the side of the NPA leadership to say, we absolutely screwed this up. Yeah. Fundamentally, we failed, as opposed to this kind of putting lipstick on a pig, so to speak, and keep on reminding us that, don't worry, we promised the check is in the mail, we're going to look after you. Well, clearly, they haven't, they failed, they have to do better.
Yep, and I've since remembered the words of the judge, Hennie, as you were responding there, a comedy of errors, quote unquote. Those were the words of the judge. So if this case was the one to bring the Guptas back to South Africa in order to stand trial, what does it say about the abilities of the NPA to actually even achieve that?
Yeah, I do think I think that the UAE had a good sense that we would probably quite possibly have messed this up. This is precisely why that small criminal state acted with such arrogance as they did to set the Guptas free 2 months ago, and then only inform our Minister of Justice, Minister Lamola, a matter of 10 days or 2 weeks ago. And then, I think, only to remind ourselves, let's join the dots, when King Nayaan, who basically, as the head of the UAE, makes all decisions and ultimately important political decisions of what happens in that country's court system, he flies into the Eastern Cape. He's bought game farms here. He flies in at the weekend, and there's not even the fear that these contradictions would show up. I mean, he doesn't even fear the fact that our politicians are going to hold him to account for that decision. It means that we are failing on all sides to ensure that there's accountability for those crimes. And of course, the knock-on effect of this, it means that the big corporations, the KPMGs, the Deloittes, the PwC, and the big banks, including Standard Bank, Nedbank, HSBC, and many others who are involved in state capture, are all smiling, because as the state's case falls apart, as the Guptas get further and further beyond our reach, taking up citizenship in Vanuatu, a small island nation in the Pacific, there's just the sense that there won't be accountability. And that is something we need to be pushing back against strongly. I think that the difficulty is this becomes anchored in our minds, and the NPA isn't helping us at all to imagine a future of accountability. And that is exactly what we need to be pushing towards, of all these various elites that have been implicated in state capture crimes and the damage they brought on ordinary South Africans' lives.
Yeah. Hennie, I want to conclude this conversation on a point that you've actually just made, and that's the fact that the UAE president is actually in our country and is here for 2 weeks. He's going to be in this particular lodge that apparently is owned by him. Let's actually make that connection, because when the NPA head, alongside the Minister of Justice, were addressing on exactly the fact that you've just mentioned, that the Guptas are slowly but surely almost going into jurisdictions where we may not even have the instruments to bring them back here. I asked Shamila Patoy the question that how confident is she that this case will actually not fall apart in court? And her words were, we cannot comment on a case that is in front of the court. And it actually prompts the question, if Iqbal Sharma were to disappear right now, would we have the ability to even know where he is?
Yeah, I think it's an important question, Polly, and I think it's the question which we should be asking of the president, who ultimately, who our state security agent reports to. It's the state security agent that should have been following the Guptas very closely and not doing anything sinister in the United Arab Emirates, but collecting evidence on the ground, working with officials in our embassy in the United Arab Emirates to say, are these people being held in criminal custody? Where are they? Pick up any information about their release. Clearly, none of that happened. There's, either none of it happened, or the politicians simply decided to ignore information that was put before them. It suggests, therefore, that the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, that the President and the Minister of Justice should have all been pushing for a political response when it came to the Guptas, to put pressure on the King Nayaan and his colleagues who control the judiciary in the United Arab Emirates, which is not free and it is not fair. It's not an independent judiciary, and should have said, if you want to bring your 500 people, including your dancers, to come and feast in the Eastern Cape for 2 weeks on game farms, then you need to make sure that you are going to bring those Guptas, so to speak, in the hold back on your aeroplane. Well, none of that happened. It shows, it makes us, unfortunately, bringing it back, Polly, to the judge's comments in the Nulane matter, it makes us look foolish, like a foolish, unserious country as a result, where people can basically play the fool with us and then still enjoy South Africa like some kind of Disneyland after doing so, despite the clear harm, the damage that these individuals and these networks have wrought on South Africa. So I do worry that the Iqbal Sharmas and others could slip through the net. One only has to go onto social media and look at Iqbal Sharma and his partner and see how they are living lavish lifestyles all around the world. And that is what we refer to as impunity. They've gotten away with it, and they are living absolutely the high life. And I think there is a way almost of trivializing justice. The message, therefore, is sent that the very powerful can get away with it. And that is what happens when our prosecuting authority is not serious about the business that they need to be doing. I think, crucially, Polly, it's not about saying now we need to give up any faith in the NPA in doing its work. It is crucial to sustaining our constitutional democracy. But what needs to happen is that there needs to be proper, serious introspection from the side of the NPA, from the side of the Department of Justice. If they need more capacity, they need to fire the old state capture network that still exists and the bad people, which they refuse to do within the NPA. Bring in young, capable prosecutors and remunerate them properly, and get on with the job of helping to rebuild and to fix our country. And that isn't happening right now.
Hennie van Vuuren, what a good point to end this conversation. Director of Open Secrets, Hennie van Vuuren there.